How is the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, transforming how it operates and does business? What is the IRS doing to advance its digital services and enhance customer experience? And how is it modernizing the agency's technology infrastructure? I'll explore these questions and so much more with our very special guest, Danny Werfel, Commissioner of the U.S. Internal Revenue Service, the IRS. When you think of your role, perhaps you could share with the audience, what's the day in the life of the IRS Commissioner? What are your duties and responsibilities in managing such an important agency?
Well, first of all, the organization is large in terms of its footprint. You know, we have more than 90,000 employees as of now. We have 500 facilities across the country. There's a lot of logistics around our campus operations. We have submission processing centers. During filing season, they can take upwards of 300,000 pieces of mail a day coming in. There's an extraordinarily large call center where we're getting millions of phone calls each year. We have walk-in centers all around the country that need to be staffed, need to be secure, and need to have trained personnel on hand. There are scheduling appointments associated with all of them. And my job is to really be the captain of this very large ship, and to, again, empower the people that are running these day-to-day business units to make sure they have what they need in terms of resources, in terms of an understanding of what the priorities are, what direction we're headed. Sometimes they need the commissioner to help troubleshoot a problem that has emerged. For whatever reason, I often think about things in terms of train schedules. It's a big metaphor for me.
Really?
And I'll probably get into it as we go through the questions.
I love that.
And so I think about sometimes a train breaks down, and in order to fix it, I don't need to get involved at all, but I need to be aware of it because I need to figure out how to signal to other stakeholders that we have a train broken down. Sometimes they actually need a commissioner decision, whether it's a resource decision, moving the right personnel into space, making a decision that no one other than the commissioner is authorized to make in order to get that train up and running again. So it differs. Some problems can be solved without my involvement. Sometimes I need to get involved. Probably the most important thing is, what is the future of the train system that we're running? What are we going to open more platforms? Are we going to update to a faster, more modern train? What are we going to do to ensure more security on our train platforms? What are we doing to make sure that the customers that are coming down those escalators into the metro system are having a positive experience? All of that, as we evolve to try to grow the organization so that it is fit for the 21st century, the commissioner really has to set out the vision and have a vision that understands that there's a lot of different directions we can go, a lot of different things we can prioritize, but you're really honing down to where do we want to take this agency going forward. And I think that's one of the most important parts of the IRS. Also, I'm the public face of the organization. I'm the one who typically answers the tough questions from Congress, the tough questions from the media, and I have worked hard to hone the way in which I communicate with the public to make sure that it's easy to understand, that it's simple, get away from technocratic language, and in the tax system that can often be difficult. It also means taking the punches, right, and owning the accountability, which I am actually proud and honored for such an important organization filled with people that I have inherent trust of. I'm just blown away by their dedication, their public service. I feel a sense of partnership with each and every IRS employee. The fact that I'm the one kind of shielding the blows and feeling the blows, that I feel a sense of real privilege to be able to do that. So one thing that the IRS commissioner doesn't do, which I want to myth bust a little bit, I don't get involved in individual taxpayer issues. So if you're out there and you're like, gosh, I really wish I didn't have to be audited, I'm going to call the commissioner. I can't help you. I do not get involved in whether it's a business or an individual. There are firewalls in place. to make sure that I am steering a ship, but I am not in the engine room, that level. That there are a host of really, really good policy, internal control, all host optics reasons why you do not want the commissioner leaning in on individual taxpayer matters.
The integrity of the agency itself. So with that kind of portfolio, Danny, I was wondering, what are some of your, perhaps you could share with us some of your most important challenges you're facing and how have you sought to address those?
Well, right now, we're at an inflection point. Okay. And so from 2010 to 2022, our budget was cut year over year. While this was happening, the tax system grew in complexity in a variety of different ways. There are more filers than there were in 2010. There are more currencies than there were in 2010. There are more tax law changes and complexities in the tax code over the previous 12 years. There are more responsibilities that the IRS has. I mentioned the Affordable Care Act earlier. We have new programs that have been enacted by Congress that we need to build infrastructure for. There's complexity in our economy that exists today with respect to the digital economy. If I was sitting, I haven't been here in 12 or 13 years. When we were sitting here the last time, let's say in 2010, if I started talking about some of the companies out there that are, picking people up, delivering food, the payment platforms, you said, what are you talking about? These companies and these activities didn't exist. And they introduce new dynamics into the tax system that we need to accommodate through technology, through forms, through training in order to serve the tax system. So all of that changed while our budget was cut. And when COVID hit, that really, what was already kind of stretched at the seams, those stitches really started to rip apart. And so if you look back at tax filing season 2022, that year was a low point for us. We had record low level of service. We had record long wait times on our calls. We had a record high paper backlog that needed to be processed. And we had anemic audit rates across the board. Going back to the metaphor, the trains really were not running well at all. They were always late. We had people waiting on the platforms to be picked up. The air conditioning wasn't working and it was hot in the summer. All of it was not working well. Enter the Inflation Reduction Act, which provides the IRS, infuses after all these years of budget cuts, tens of billions of dollars to do two things. To both bring us back to par performance. Let's get back to historical levels of performance. But also, because of the size of the investment, we can actually build an IRS for the future. We can build an IRS fit for 21st century realities. And so it is a once in maybe not just a generation, once in an ever opportunity. I tell IRS employees whenever I travel around and meet with them, town hall meetings and other kinds of meetings, I share with them that the way I think about the challenge and the opportunity that we have is I picture the IRS 30 years from now and whoever's the commissioner and the leaders. And I picture them looking back to 2023, 2024, 2025 and saying, that version of the IRS had this amazing opportunity that had never come before and will probably never come again. They got tens of billions of dollars to build an IRS for the future. What did they do with that opportunity? And it's intimidating to think about it that way, but it's also motivating and inspiring. And so I don't want us to squander that opportunity. So going back to what's the biggest challenge we have, the biggest challenge we have is to seize the opportunity that we have and build that IRS for the future. And then underneath that big statement is how, what does that mean? And so I talked earlier about honing the vision. So I'm going to tee up your next question for you. What is that vision? And so this is, I thought a long time about because I don't want it to sound technocratic. And if I say we're going to modernize the IRS, what does that mean? You can't get your mind around it. So what I've come up with to explain the vision, I call it my Thanksgiving test. And the Thanksgiving test is I pretend I'm sitting across the table from my ultra-conservative aunt and my ultra-liberal uncle, and someone at the other end of the table says, hey, Danny, what is the IRS going to do with all that money? And then I have to answer. And if I pass the Thanksgiving test, both my aunt and uncle will give me the thumbs up, so it'll be nonpartisan. It will be easy to understand. And it won't be something that's coming to a theater near you in 2035. It'll be something that that my aunt and uncle and others can feel more immediately. So I've got to pass the Thanksgiving test. And the way I proceed to pass the Thanksgiving test is I keep it in the family because I think people like to understand things more in practical terms. I point to one end of this Thanksgiving table to my parents. And I say my parents, who are in their 80s, have never used an ATM machine in their lives. When they get cash, they go into the bank and they meet with the one teller that's still there and they fill out their withdrawal slip and they take their cash out. And my children who are in their 20s sitting at the other end of the table have never been inside a bricks and mortar bank. If grandma gives my daughter a check for her graduation, my daughter flips over her smartphone, takes a picture of that check, and deposits it right into her online bank account all within a matter of 10 seconds. And that means that the bank never gets that paper check, so less paper going to the bank. And it's likely to be an accurate transaction because it's automated and digital and has been increasingly perfected over time. And it means that the customer service that my daughter received in depositing that check was very seamless for that simple action. So what I say is we need to build an IRS for the future. We have a generational imperative because my children, this emerging generation of taxpayers and future generations of taxpayers will expect to do all their interactions, all their business, all their commerce, whether it's with the IRS or otherwise, from their smartphones, from their tablets, virtually wherever they are in the world. So first part of the vision, all taxpayers should be able to do all interactions with the IRS digitally or virtually if they choose. That's the first part of the vision. And we're not there yet. For with all those years of underfunding, we have a lot of work to do to make that option a reality. There are things that you cannot do today with the IRS digitally. It has to be done in a non-automated way. So we have a lot of work to do. The second part of the vision is what do we do with all the capacity that we unlock when we go as digital as we can go? So if you go back to the banks, when the banks developed increasingly and continue to develop increasingly sophisticated online platforms, that means less of a need for bricks and mortar, less people coming in, less paper coming in, more controls that are integrated into their customer interface so there are less errors. Less cleanup to do, and less phone calls coming into their 1-800 numbers, a precipitous drop in their 1-800 footprints. So we're going to unlock all this capacity. What do we do with that capacity? And I think we do two things. We help people that need it the most, and we scrutinize those that deserve it the most or warrant it the most. Now, on helping people that need it the most, there are so many examples of that where you can't just flip your smartphone over and take a picture and get the job done. First of all, there's members of our taxpaying community who don't have smartphones, who don't have high bandwidth Wi-Fi. There are taxpayers out there in underserved communities who can't afford an accountant. These are taxpayers that are, first of all, most vulnerable to being scammed as part of like these tax scammers that are out there. And they also don't always get access to the tax system for whatever reason. Case in point, there are more than 5 million taxpayers each year that are eligible for the Earned Income Tax Credit, but don't ever apply for it and don't get it. So there's something not happening. We're not connecting with these. These aren't people that are eligible and there's some kind of improper payment. This is, they're not applying. They're not interacting with the tax system. So we need a ground game to support people in underserved populations because things aren't going as well there in terms of the scams are on the rise. They're increasingly being victimized by bad actors. And they're not getting access to the credits they're entitled to with the right level of frequency and fidelity. Now, so that's helping people that need it the most. And there's many other examples of that. Because whether you're in an underserved community or not, there's a lot of edge cases where it's not as simple as just depositing a check. And we need to open up the phone lines for those individuals and have more appointments available for those individuals. So there's a whole much more we can do to meet people that actually really need to talk to us or engage with us more fulsomely. On the hold people accountable side, let's start with the tax scam artists and how we can build out an increasingly more sophisticated enforcement footprint to disrupt those scam artists. And let's also talk about tax evaders, those that are intentionally evading taxes, shielding their income in complexity. And that's the long pole in the tent for us. That's where when we've been underfunded, where we've struggled the most, is if you have the sophistication and the means to use complexity to shield your income, the wholly owned subsidiary with the wholly owned subsidiary with the wholly owned subsidiary, shell companies moving money overseas, all these various ways in which income is shielded, we have a lot more work to do there.
You mentioned your vision, you mentioned certain priorities, and you focused on the two areas you really want to tackle. And I was just wondering, before I get into one of those particular areas, because I drill down a little bit on the customer experience, how is the implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act going? Is there a status report, or how is it?
It is absolutely a great question, and I will share right up front. It's going extremely well, but it's a balanced scorecard.
Yes. Okay.
I do not like victory laps because there's always more work to be done. And every run we score, we can look at the scorecard and say we just gave up a run, right? And so it is a swimming upstream, but there's been tremendous progress. First of all, I mentioned earlier, we needed to get back to par performance. Yes. And we've essentially done that, right? We went from, in 2022, we measure it by what's called level of service, like how many people are getting through. We were at like 20% on our phone lines, and we've now set a goal of 85%. We've hit it 2 years in a row. On our main phone line, for the 1040 line, we call it, which has, roughly 70 or more % of all the call volume for that line. Not only was the level of service up north of 85%, also our average wait time was down to 3 minutes. And so that's a dramatic shift. Yeah. So that's a run scored, but no victory lap, because we have other call lines in the rest of the 30% that we still are working on to get up to those levels. We essentially have eliminated our paper backlog, but we still have one area of a paper backlog that we're still working through. But without the Inflation Reduction Act, we wouldn't have gotten any of these done. Yeah. And then on the modernization, real important progress. 10, 15 times more updates to irs.gov in the past 2 years than in the entire 20 years previous to that combined. Just scaling digital solutions, more and more things. It's almost, think about it like a charity drive with a thermometer filling up as we're trying to make all transactions, all business available digitally. It's brick by brick. It's increment by increment. Can we add a digital solution for this? Can we add a digital solution for that? And after many years of stagnancy, that is changing. And on the helping people that need it the most, we have opened more walk-in centers around the country. They used to be understaffed. They're fully staffed. Each and every year, year over year, there's more serving more taxpayers, more hours of availability year on year. So access is really growing under the Inflation Reduction Act, and we're really, really proud of that. And then on the enforcement side, we've announced a series of steps we're taking, in particular around these complex filers, these high wealth filers, where when we were underfunded, we couldn't keep pace. We didn't have the right subject matter expertise, team size, technology to really go and scrutinize taxpayers that have means, that can afford accountants, can afford lawyers, but still were not paying their taxes. So a great example of that is 100,000 filers that owe delinquent tax debt, and they're millionaires, right? And cracking down on that and collecting those funds back. Over 100,000 wealthy filers who never filed, who are wealthy but never even filed their taxes. And so by going after these opportunities, we're already have collected north of $1 billion in either back taxes from the wealthy or non-filing taxes that were owed from the wealthy. So we're off and running on these commitments that we've made. Because when we started with the Inflation Reduction Act, and we said, what does it mean for you as a taxpayer? It means if you're middle or low income, better service, and if you're high income, better service. But if you're high income who happens to not be playing by the rules, it means more scrutiny. Yeah. And that's the North Star, and we're making good progress.
There's other things you've been piloting, and I was wondering if you can give us an update on the direct file pilot. What's going on there? How are you looking to expand it?
Such an interesting program that we're excited about, and the reason we're excited about it is I mentioned earlier. If taxpayers want to submit in paper, they should have the choice to do it.
Yes.
When I think about someone who needs to meet their tax obligations, I'd like there to be a very simple menu of options for how you file, and then you choose the method that works best for you. So if the method that works best for you is paper and pencil, then we will meet you where you are and try to make that process as smooth as possible. If you want to file with an accountant and you have the means to do it, great. If you want to file electronically using a commercial software provider, terrific. The commercial software providers are our partners. They're terrific partners. Their customers are very happy often with those products. And it's been a great advantage to the success of the filing system, the commercial providers. What happened is there is a material number of taxpayers out there who wanted another option on the menu. They wanted an option to file electronically for free directly with the IRS. You can file electronically for free with the software providers. You have to work with them to determine whether you are eligible for their free solution. And we encourage taxpayers, if that's the right approach for them, to do so. But again, there are taxpayers out there who said, you know what, IRS? We want you to do a free solution that's direct with you. How do we know that taxpayers wanted that? We got a lot of letters, not just from taxpayers, but mostly from what I call intermediaries.
More paper.
Hundreds of members of Congress urging us to provide this option. Hundreds of nonprofits around the country who work with taxpayers who urged us to provide this option. So there was a groundswell for another item on the menu. And so this was the challenge that was before us. Secretary Yellen heard this feedback from around the country in particular, and she directed me and the IRS last year to pilot for the first time this direct file solution, which provides taxpayers an option to file electronically direct for free. And so we rolled it out last year as a pilot. We had a little bit more than 140,000 taxpayers across the country use the product, and reviews were extremely positive. We scored very high in terms of our customer satisfaction with the product. And there were actually a lot of media coverage of the government put out a technology that works, because we encouraged media members to use the product as well and review us like a restaurant. We added an item to the menu, and then we invited the restaurant reviewers to tell us how we did. Is the item in the menu good? Does it taste good? And the reviews were positive. And as a result of that, we are now intend to make this a permanent option. We were in roughly a dozen states last year, and now we've opened it up to all 50 states who want to participate can. And we've been working, there's been several announcements of some states who have said, yep, we're in, we're going to be a direct file state. And then other states that are still mulling it over, and we're working with them. Why is it important to get the state partner? Because when you file your taxes, there's two parts to it. The first part is the federal. And if your state has an income tax, and not every state does, but most do, if your state has an income tax, once you finish your federal, you go to part two, which is your state. And for the taxpayer to have a good experience with direct file, they can't just say, okay, great, you did your federal, now go figure out what to do with your states.
How to marry them up.
The taxpayer needs to have this seamless experience. Once they finish with direct file, we hand them off to the state solution. So the states, in order to sign on, have to be ready to take the taxpayer from us to them and put them in their electronic environment for that free direct approach. So we did that successfully with four states last year, and now and all the non-income tax states were a part of it. And now more and more states are coming in saying, we have a solution that we think could work, or we have a line of sight on how to develop a solution. So next filing season, there'll be millions more taxpayers eligible than were last filing season, and we'll see how it goes in year two.
This has been the Business of Government Hour, a conversation with Danny Werfel, Commissioner of the IRS. Be sure to join us next time for another informative, insightful, an in-depth conversation on improving government leadership and its effectiveness. Until then, subscribe, download, and listen to the entire interview at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, or on your favorite podcast app, and as always at businessofgovernment.org.